Good day, listeners. Today's episode talks about two sisters who are fighting tooth and nail to get the best care for their mother. As you listen, you'll hear about the different factors and circumstances that makes this their story a almost textbook perfect scenario in finding the best care, comfort, and safety for their mother. In it, you'll hear about challenging medical professionals as well as obtaining an irrevocable trust. Thank you. Welcome, Susan. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate your willingness and openness to sort of share your story about you and your sister's story, as a matter of fact, about taking care of your mom. And before we begin, can you just tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm single, never had any children. I'm the youngest of two daughters in the family. My sister is older than me. Raised in New York City, lived here all my life. My dad had his own business, so was raised in a sort of entrepreneurial type family where my grandparents lived where my dad worked, so very family-oriented family. I've had Catholic school education from elementary all the way up to actually my master's program, believe it or not. So religion and spirituality also is a big part of my life.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Can you share a little bit about your occupation, education, you said?
Yes,
Yeah.
I have an MBA, both undergraduate business degree in marketing that I received from St. John's University and University of Mary. My occupation, I am in fundraising and advancement, actually for St. John's University.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. And if I recall, you're a proud Italian, right?
Yes, well, my mother's Irish, so Italian and Irish.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. All right.
I don't look Irish, I look more Italian, so people always forget the other half.
Yes, and that lovely Anthony's Italian restaurant that we love to go to.
That's right.
But I know you for a number of years now, and I know that what's very important is the care of your mom and safety and her security, and really securing throughout our discussion, you would talk about it, and as well as that's one of your concerns of really ensuring her best care and her best and her safety. So let's dive into it. So share with me, please, Susan, about your experience and your sister's experience, both of you as siblings caring for your mom.
Well, first, I just want to thank you for putting this project together. I think it is really, really critical and valuable for the country, not only for New York and for local communities and so forth, for the whole country. Because with an aging population, the country, I really feel really surprised and disappointed at the United States that I don't feel that their priorities are in the right place when it comes to caring for elderly people. And I think this is a vehicle where people like myself, especially if you're like in your midlife, you're going to experience this at some point in your life if you have parents who are aging. And the care is at all different levels. It really depends how your parents age. And at my job, I also work with the elderly population. So I've seen it for many, many years. And I think it also is affected by your socioeconomic status. If you're very wealthy, you may struggle, but not as much. And if you're very poor, you will struggle, but you will get all the services, hopefully, that you need. And in the middle, you're sunk. Because you've got to fight for everything. And that's basically, I mean, my sister was going to be on this call, but she's sick with a really bad cold. Thankfully, not COVID. But I think it's just the stress and being tired and exhausted because she's a nurse and she bared the brunt when my mother was in the hospital because I felt like that was her forte and I let her take the lead. But she was fighting tooth and nail.
Really?
She worked in a hospital for 40 years and she still had to fight and she knew how to navigate the system so well. My sister used to be in home care. She was also a nursing administrator that managed 500 people at a very prestigious hospital in New York. And so you would think we wouldn't have any problems. And we still encountered. So I can't imagine if you don't have the sophistication like my sister has in the education. You know what I'm saying? What I mean by sophistication, the education.
Yeah.
What happens? And my sister and I, when we first, my mother, we've been taking care of my mom for like over 7 years. My dad had passed away. My dad needed some care over the 12 years of the last part of his life. But when you have the other spouse, my mother was pretty much taking care of my mom. They were helping each other, and we just had to help to a certain degree. We were concerned, and we would step in whenever they needed assistance. But as soon as that one spouse passes away,
yeah,
it totally changes the whole scenario.
Really?
And I think also it depends on which spouse passes away. Now, it's very interesting. My mother, I felt, was always the stronger of the two. So I always think back, it would be interesting if my mother went before my father, what it would be like. My father maybe would be more comfortable going to an assisted living because he was a social kind of guy and he loved to be around people. My mother is sociable and personable, but she's got to get to know you a little bit more, and she is very independent and loves to just leave me alone. Like, just to be on her own, she's fine. So she's not a good candidate for assisted living.
Okay.
She doesn't want someone telling her to wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning. So the first thing I think when things changed, it was like, what kind of care? What do we do? That's the first step. Do you leave your mother in the house? Do you sell the house? There's so many decisions. And for like 5 years, it was like swirling around in my head, like, what's the best way to care for my mom? And my sister and I, it's not ideal. And I really think for most people, when I talk to them that are in this situation, there is really not an ideal situation because, again, no knock on assisted living places, but they're good ones and they're bad ones. But I feel in New York, they're more bad than good. And you're spending $12,000 a month, and you're hearing like, she was at one, she spent $12,000 a month. She was on the floor in her room for 3 days. And no one even came down. They go down to eat. Realize this woman didn't come down to eat. Check on her. I mean, that's what you're paying all these services for, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you go into these places, and like I said, the experience that I have with my job, I go to visit a lot of the donors that are in these developments. Now, mind you, most of them I visit in Florida, I think, has a little bit of sophistication than New York in terms of their facilities for elderly people. But like I said, some of them are blessed with good health, and yes, they're playing pickleball or they're taking advantage of some of those things. And it really depends on how you age. Is some of these facilities are good for you, and some of them I think are detrimental.
So let's go. So Susan, let's go back to what you were talking about. I think what people would like to hear is about your sister and her vast experience in healthcare, including home health. And what was that like for you and your sister to get to navigate the healthcare system to provide care for your mom? Would you share with us some examples of that experience?
Well, my sister and I were just talking this morning because my mother came home from the hospital again. My sister, 40 years, a nurse.
Uh-huh.
My mother comes home from the hospital. She had a stroke. The biggest thing for a stroke patient is therapy. You want them to get the therapy as quickly as possible.
Yes.
She's been home a week now from the hospital. She hasn't had it. One iota of therapy.
Wow.
Okay.
And why is that?
You plan this way before they leave and before they're discharged from the hospital. But yet, finally, one of the people from the home care agency came to assess, and they said, okay, you're going to have it Monday. But I can't tell you how many phone calls my sister made and had to argue with people to get their attention, to get this person to even come to the house. Now, the first person, this is what we were talking about, because she said, again, if you don't know how to navigate the system, I feel my mother probably wouldn't get therapy for another 3 weeks.
Yes.
Because most people would probably leave it up to the social worker and to the caseworker. Social workers, surprisingly, never even once came to visit us in the hospital.
Really? Okay.
Nope, not once. That's going to go on the survey. I hate to say it. We have to let the hospital know that social workers, because now the social worker did come to visit. That's because my sister made a big fuss, people that she internally, and so this woman came probably because she heard there was static. And she came and she said, "Oh, I'm just coming to say hello."
Okay.
And that was it, and walked out the door.
Yeah.
So the first thing you have to do is really when you're in the hospital, you've got to get the wheels in motion. Otherwise, again, you can see even with the wheels in motion, it takes even over a week before you get the care that you need in order for your loved one to get better.
We also know that physical therapy, we can't delay that, right? If you don't use the muscle, then you can lose the muscle, right?
Exactly.
And especially with a stroke, it's very critical. It sort of reminds me of what I experienced as well with my mother. Unfortunately, I didn't have the connections to then really to make a difference or have an immediate influence. But you were talking, so my mom had to wait 3 weeks. So tell me, what was it that you think made the difference? You said, was it your sister then made a complaint, right?
Yeah, I mean, she knew who to go to say something's not right. Now, my sister used to be in home care many, many years ago. So what she was familiar with the system is the nurse first comes and assesses and all of this.
Right.
They said, "Oh, no, there's no nurse." And my sister's like, "Really?" And they were kind of dismissing her, saying, "Oh, you haven't done home care in a long time. It's changed. The PT does everything now. There's not a nurse." That didn't sit right for my sister. So she went back and they were surprised. They said, "No, you should have had a nurse." And it turned out the caseworker didn't check off a box.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's why my mother didn't get the nurse. When my sister was talking to certain people, they said, "I don't understand why you have to check off the box." If they saw that she was coming home with new medications and she's a stroke patient, that's an automatic. You're going to need a nurse, right?
Right.
You need to check off a box.
Right.
It's ridiculous. So that's what I'm saying. Like, one thing by not checking off the box on a form has now delayed a lot of her services. And she needs to see an OT. Her swallowing was affected.
Okay.
Her whole right side was affected. And this was a mild stroke. And I'm just even shocked by that with the mild, how much is needed to get her back. Now, the PT did say to us the other day when he was assessing, he said, when someone is in their late 80s or older, you want to get them out of the hospital as quickly as possible, because the longer they are not moving, and they can become disoriented, they can get dementia, a lot of things that can happen very quickly.
Okay.
And we saw that with my mom.
Really?
My sister even said it. She was in there 2 weeks. And my sister started seeing things, and she said, "You know what? It's time for us to get mom out of here, because the longer she stays in here, I'm afraid what's going to happen."
Okay.
And I do feel that my mother got out of there just at the right time.
How are you now that you're sort of waiting for that assessment, right? For the home health agencies to sort of kick in their services. Who's taking care of mom now? I mean, what's her daily activities like?
So before the stroke, we found the best way to take care of my mother for right now, so that we don't entirely uproot our personal lives, is that my sister would stay with my mom a couple of weeks, or if I had to go on business trips and stuff, she would come. And then vice versa. If my sister has to work or whatever. But then we found over time, after 7 years, that was getting hard, because during the day, my sister was able to work from home, so she would stay with my mom. But now her job is changing. Now they want her in the office. So finally I said, "Look, I think we really need to have someone come in." So it's funny how things work. We got the companion over the summer because my mom was like, "I don't need it," because my mom was doing fairly well on her own with mild assistance. I said, "Ma," and this is so weird, not that I wished it on her, but I said, "Ma, you never know. Your situation could change in one day. It's better to get the companion now so you're comfortable with her. Or if she doesn't work out, we test everything to get you the right companion. Right. So when, God forbid, you are very ill, you have the right person in place." And that's what happened. So we have the companion during the day. Right now, up until yesterday, you really needed 2 people on my mom.
Okay.
But she miraculously is rebounding so quickly being at home. And they did say that to us, and it really is amazing. When they're out of the hospital in their own surroundings, my mother's like, totally, her situation is totally changing. She's rebounding much more quickly at home than she was in the hospital. But right now, me and my sister are in the house with my mom. I sleep with my mom because they said she didn't need a hospital bed. They said she was better off without the hospital bed. So with no railings and stuff, and if she has to get up for the bathroom, she can't really do that by herself. So we were afraid we weren't going to hear her. So I'm like really sleeping with my mom. But I will tell you a funny story. Last night, I don't know what made me wake up. I woke up and she was already out of the bed on the other side of the bed, leaning up against my dad's dresser. She almost fell. I said, oh, dear Lord. So she is fast, and that's why we wanted to sleep in the bed. But as you could see, even sleeping in the bed, I didn't realize she got out of the bed. So there's nothing ever really foolproof.
Yes.
But that's basically what we're doing. Right now, it's me and my sister living with my mom, and then seeing how things progress. If we can just do it one person with her, with the companion during the day. If I'm going to have to go away on business, my sister's going to bring in a skilled nurse for the evening to kind of help her if it's needed, because I was telling you the story before we recorded 2 days ago. I said, Ma, you really got to move your feet. My mother loves to dance. So I started teaching her little dance routines with the walker. I said, why don't you do this? This is kind of fun. And I could see she was starting to tap her feet. Well, last night we're having dinner, and all of a sudden I said, Ma, why don't you get up and just walk around a little bit? And the song, one of Prince's songs were playing. And before you know it, she started mimicking what I was showing her the day before, and she was starting to dance with the walker. And we were like, who is this person? Because like 3 days ago, we were trying to get her out of bed and everything. So she's getting her confidence. I think that's part of it too.
Yeah, I want to go back on the issue about the care which you and your sister so miraculously have been able to provide for your mom. And the way I understood it was to sort of do shift work, right?
Yeah, shift work, and right now not having the therapy. Like I said, I'm the one that my sister, and even her companion try to like, well, let's try to do arm exercises or walk around, or we're making sure that we have all the right facilities for her
at home. Yeah.
All this kind of stuff. You know, we got a certain chair in her room so she could sit. Then we got the chairlift. She never had the chairlift before. She used to walk 12 steps and another 10 steps down to her TV room, and that she can't do yet. We want to wait for the therapist before we go that far. So we have the chairlift. So we had to acclimate her and help her on that. It's really good support. I mean, if the whole family could do a kumbaya and hold hands and really participate, I think that really helps the elderly person. And it also helps because you share the responsibility. I hear a lot of times that it lands on one person, and that I don't think is fair, and I think it's harder. But if everyone helps out, it helps with their therapy and with their keeping them active and more aware and so forth.
So how
stimulation.
Yeah, so as you were talking about the companion and aid, and we know that waiting for the agency to sort of kick in. So, I mean, these things are expensive. How are you able to sort of afford that?
Well, that's a good question. That's something me and my sister were talking about. I already contacted through my job. I work with a lot of financial advisors, so I already called one because I said, I'm a little concerned because in the hospital, the agency nurses, we had her companion during the week to stay overnight. We were in the hospital during the day. Every day we were there. And at night we had our companion during the week. Her companion can't work on the weekends. So we got an agency called Access. Very, very good. The women, the nurses' aides were phenomenal.
Really? Okay.
And they were $50 an hour.
Okay.
That's expensive.
Yes, that's very expensive. Yes.
So then my sister and I, just the other day, my sister was like, that was about $1,600 to $2,000 for a 2-week stay in the hospital. Wow. And she goes, wow, the money goes fast. And I'm like, yeah, that's why I want to talk to the financial advisor now, because I want to know, like, is my mother going to be okay? And that's why my sister has us doing a lot of the stuff at night. We're trying to save my mom money too.
Right. And this is, if you don't mind me asking, this is managing your mother's finance. So it comes to the point where that's another component that you have to sort of focus on and worry about, right?
Yeah, you step in. I said to my sister, you didn't want to take away my mother's entire independence.
Sure.
So For certain important ones, we had automatic, but we would let her write the check out to Spectrum or things like that, just to make her feel good. She can't do anything.
Yes.
She would even say it. Let me do stuff. Don't take everything away.
So giving her a sense of independence.
Yeah. But now it's too much. She's focusing on her own health and walking and everything. So I said to my sister, I think it's time that we do all her bills like automatic, so that we know that everything is being taken care of.
As a matter of fact, that's what really worked for my family as well, where I had another family member manage all the sort of online bills, utilities, bank accounts, payments, etc., which nowadays you can do that, right?
Yeah.
And then another family member, they would or do the grocery shopping or pay for arrange for if we need a plumber or electrician or the lawn guy or the snow guy. And then what we did, my family, we were able to sort of arrange for the transportation and would be there in person to ensure that the companions and personal aides were sort of providing the service and really meeting grandma where she's at. But I want to go back to a really good point as we're talking about finance, Susan, and share with me, if you will, about issues around will and DNR and estate planning and trust. And how is that?
Thankfully, when my father passed away, my father didn't have he had a will, but I'm embarrassed to say his will, the last time he did his will was 1987.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would recommend that everybody has a will, has healthcare proxy, power of attorney, but also review that at least every 3 to 5 years. And so because my dad passed away was the reason why we put everything in place. And again, you have to understand what I do in my job in advancement, I handle the estate planning. So.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
When my father passed away, I tried to get him before he passed away to try to put things in order. My father was all about life and didn't want to think about it. And he was like, don't worry, everything's fine. Your mother knows everything. And my mother looked at me like, no, I don't.
Oh, wow.
Like, she just said she didn't. And I remember when my dad was alive, and literally it was 2 months before he passed away that we had this conversation. I looked at my mother and I said, we're screwed. Because I knew my father he felt like he had a will and that was it. And he didn't even have a plot, nothing.
Oh, no.
So when he died, we had to do everything the day he died. And that's the worst possible thing. Trust me, if I give any advice to anyone, don't do that. When you see your family, your parents start to age, do all of this now. Even I would recommend get the chairlift. I know they probably wouldn't want the chairlift if they say, we don't want to go to assisted living, we want to stay in the house. Get everything way ahead of time, because with my mom coming home from the hospital, we had to run around and get certain things that she didn't have enough, that was equipment and stuff to help her. And you're exhausted from being in the hospital and taking care of all that stuff. And now you got to deal with all this, and you have to rush because they don't tell you when she's going to be discharged to the very last minute. So you're like hustling, running around like a chicken without heads, trying to put all this stuff in place. So really planning, I'm sounding like the advisors that I hired to give educational talks to the donors and to the alumni. But really, planning is key. The more planning you do ahead of time, better for you and for your parents. And you have to have the hard discussions. And if they don't want to talk about their demise or about getting sick or anything, just say, we have to talk about this.